And
Oh.
now, yes. Hello. Hi,
Hello. We are
Josephine.
live. Ah, we're taking place.
Hello. Um, yes, well, it's very nice to actually have you all there, kind of aggregated in just accumulated in one image. And so, of course, we are here in the third conversation taking place from Columbus, Ohio, and we have also Josephine from New York. And so I think, I would perhaps switch the format a little bit. And can you hear me? I just had a kind of a blip here. Okay.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Like you then have this almost week process, creative process, and I want today perhaps have the possibility that you can also talk to each other. It's not that you have not talked about yourself, because I think that some of you have been staying together and exchanging a lot, and I can see in the excitement and also the language that you have created between you. So I want you to, to introduce yourself a little bit. Perhaps we have people that will see this conversation, will watch this interview just the first time, and just briefly, and we can go, the four of you, and introducing yourself very quickly. Okay.
All right. I'm Peter Kyle, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
And you made.
And I made a dance called Yet Even in That Silence.
Uh-huh.
Next. I'm Nicole Garlando I live in Columbus now, and I thought of this idea and coordinated the folks coming and participated in workshops and the performance, and my work was also adjudicated to be in the show from the local people. So.
And I'm CoCo Loupe, and I lived in Columbus for 10 years, and I'm now back home and came back to Columbus for this project. And I made a dance, and I'm in Claire's work for this project.
Great.
I'm KJ Holmes, and I live in Brooklyn, and I made a piece called Re-Enteringless.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Claire Porter, and I used to live in Columbus in the 70s, and I live in New Jersey now, and I made a piece called Beside Myself Deciding.
Nice. And Josephine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Josephine Dorado, and I'm one of the co-founders also of Meta Academy, and the bulk of my research the last decade has been around online embodiment and network performance, so performance in online and network environments, and I'm obsessed with thinking about the ways that physical and digital can merge.
That's great. Yeah, well, my name is Marlon Barrios Solano, and I work in also this intersection of presence and networks, and how to try to understand in this exploration of Meta Academy how to use the network environments to co-create a knowledge together. Okay, so. And that can go from dance to all the ideas about our movement and about things that our community does. Yeah. So, and we have been talking a lot in relationship to process. I think there are all these. I have a noise in the background. Huh? What is that? Okay, so can you hear me? It's just like there is this huge noise coming. I don't know if it is.
I don't hear it. We can hear you though.
Okay, yes. So mostly the keywords that perhaps have emerged in a lot of some of the word visualizations that some of the Meta Academy participants have done is it has process. Practically is one of the words that perhaps is repeated the most, or has been kind of sampling, or have been seen and perceived the most in our conversations. The other things that is coming out is memory. It's interesting. Memory and transmission. The word also mentorship. And also, someone actually foreground the word conditions. You know, what are the conditions in which we create? So that's just to create some kind of semantic framework for our conversation. And so I would like then just to improvise this a little bit and throw the ball to you. And I just would like to see if you have any questions, you know, questions that we can perhaps try to enlighten or kind of even activate together in relationship to perhaps people can watch and then can also generate some angles for this. So in relation to your own creative process, to this week experience, even in relationship to this windows that we are opening through the internet. So what's hot in your head right now? Yeah. Ha ha ha.
I'm just reflecting on the talk back last night. We had a talk back after the and the audience was very present and had some very interesting questions. And hearing you now talk about certain words and asking questions, it's just the beautiful, I don't know if it's a question, but something to talk about, the way that we talk about dance. Like the communication through language and the search for not defining something, but to discuss what kind of words do we use to talk about what we talk about is very curious to me. And how does that reflect our different ways of making work through what kind of words we use?
What made you think that? What made you, you know, I really feel like it's a very good question in relation with language, but what specifically made trigger that?
Well,
in what you perceived?
But dance.
There was one guy who asked about where in our mind do we hold what we're making in terms of how do we create the language about dance.
Mm-hmm.
And just the idea of looking at how I might look at where do I hold my thinking process, not necessarily just in my brain, was very radical for him, the questioner. So that opened up a new way of perceiving how we move, how his mind moves in his thinking about it.
He asked us to describe what the mental space looks like that is created when we are creating and or when we are performing inside of these works that come from this improvisational structure and generation, and like he literally said, what does the mental space look like? Can you describe it to me? And that really made us all kind of question, what is a mental space, and sort of how they're seeing us and experiencing what we're doing, and the assumption that it is somewhere in the head space or the brain space or the cognitive, the neuro space. And KJ, I think, immediately said, "Oh, something about something about the body intelligence, or it's not all up here. It's in the entire structure of my body and the systems of my body." Is that what you said? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Something like that, but
it
wasn't just that it was in my head as a box.
Yeah, and for example, if you can, first of all, we need to give a little bit of context. Is that okay? Last night we had there was the very first showing, isn't it, of several pieces. If someone can give a little bit of context for that, for people who's watching or who will watch this in the future.
At the end of this project, we decided to show the process in the form of a dance concert or a performance. And so we had the first of those last night, and each choreographer that you see here that we brought in, plus Phoebe Miller, you know, each made a work as part of this project in between 6 and 13 days. And then we had a show of them. So this is what we're talking about now.
Okay, well, thank you. So then, you know, what can you circulate about that question of this kind of framing, you know, the ways of talking, of this idea of that there is such a thing as a mental space. You know, that is an interesting, you know, that there is, seems like we have that experience that we can define that there is something like space that is mental. You know, for me that's an interesting.
I think it's curiosity, or generating. If you generate curiosity, already you're in a space of wonder and question and discovery, and I think that's really rich.
Well, I think it also harks back into what we were talking about last time we met on Hangout, and this issue of space and curiosity came up too, and there was some discussion around like exploration and ideas forming being like constellations and swarming around those little constellations of ideas and how that takes shape, and like the question of language also came up too. So I think it's really interesting that it's kind of circling back around to that, and you know, as far as like mental space goes, the way that it breaks out of the box of the mental space and sort of radiates out to our extremities in the same way as I think also of online space, like radiating out in a rhizomatic manner. So I feel like the body very much like reflects that kind of a space, and it's just by the fact that like us as beings like think that way and feel that way, and sort of we project that into the spaces that we interact in too.
Josephine, can you unpack what do you mean by rhizomatic or rhizomatique?
Rhizomatic. So by rhizomatic, I just mean that like this idea of the structure radiating out like not necessarily a centralized way, like it branches off, you know, and has these ventricle, you know, I guess ventricles that sort of go in all different directions, and it's not necessarily centralized, although there are certainly like nodes of activity in certain places. So
it's kind of the metaphor of a network.
Yeah.
You know, that the rhizomatic structures.
And then our body is that way too, and you know, our connections with other people are that way. So it makes sense that, you know, we would also think of, you know, kind of breaking out of this mental box and the way it resonates into our body that way too.
Yeah, one of the things that I will throw back at you, all of you, is you know, like normally we start thinking that there is some kind of purity, you know, either of the physical exploration and the mental exploration, or the linguistic exploration, and we know that perhaps, you know, and we behave that in a way that they are interconnected or they are integrated, you know, but definitely there is this kind of interesting thing that here we are in this moment right now talking and a full flesh and bodied experience, but of course contextually and in the level of tasking, we are creating a different context, let's say, than a body-mind centering exploration of the experience. So for me, you know, there is something that, and this is like a huge epistemological discussion, you know, just like how language and movement and embodied in our embodied condition are actually integrated. You know, so, and then that's what we talk as a languaging process, as an embodied process. Also, language is a full-fledged embodied process. So, languaging. So, and there is this whole discussion right now, which is interesting, how abstraction in itself is a full-fledged embodied process. So, and actually, I interviewed Barbara Dilley, and I published the interview this morning. And she says these beautiful things about how she approached in the 70s a lot of the Buddhist how you create this kind of wise knowledge is literally contemplating also what you learn verbally and then introducing it in a practice. So practically, she talks about this ongoing recursive process of contemplation as practice, and practice as action, and action as listening. And, and coming from a lot of the things that she started practicing in early 70s. Anyway, yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to speak to the idea of somatics, is that one of the roots of the word soma is the nectar of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And that soma also means body.
Uh-huh.
So there's something really, I always find that like when we go into that sense of purity, there's no one thing, but there's
Mm-hmm.
something about the wisdom of the ages through us.
Mm.
So the soma of the gods through the soma of the body. To me,
Yeah.
that speaks to something about the poetics that we can get to as we discuss these things.
Yeah. And also, like I want to address, and perhaps you can react to that, to the market. We have become practitioners of the talking about what we do. Not only what we do is actually the politically we and economically we have learned to what we're doing. Create living in a knowledge capitalism that we live. Practically, we have more than performers, we have become teachers or transmitters of the knowledge as practically 90% of our income. So I think that there is something quite important about the cultural, including socioeconomics of the milieu that we live in, that have made us very good about developing this degree of intersubjectivity and through the storytelling, and that's what we are doing right now. So, but it's something quite political about the economy also that we live now, that we have to write grants, we have to articulate what we do, and most of us work transmitting the knowledge, not only as this isolated artist just doing the art, which is perhaps a mythology.
We were talking a lot about the different roles or the different options that we had here. Facilitation, creation, performance, being a student, collaborator. I mean, it's all sort of the same thing and happening all at once. So it just reminded me of that, and I'd love to hear you all speak to that a little bit about the ways that how you felt like what your agency was, what you took agency to do while you were here, what took place for you.
In the making, you're talking about?
In the project, I think, not just I realized, I kind of pinholed the process to gear toward the performance. It's another discussion, but yes. So I'd like to hear what you experience just living together and talking to each other and working with the people here, and what sort of agency.
Well, for me, there were two aspects. One was the working with the performers and playing. I call it play work, where we generate material and I ask questions, they answer, the back and forth event, and I end up structuring it and looking at what it is and then revising. The other, which was totally satisfying with this particular group, loved them, they were wonderful. And then the other aspect was hanging out with each other, talking about art making and walking, and I didn't walk, but that was
talked about walking.
Well, yeah, talk about walking. Just the camaraderie and other artists working and what it's like, and so it was a very inspiring. That was very special. And unlike, say, Berenstain, where just you're working by yourself, you're not working with other creators. So that, I think, was an important part. that you've created.
Yeah, and I mean, I had the privilege of taking everybody's workshop during the last 12 days also, as well as rehearsing, making my own piece. And it's been a long time since I feel like I've taken it upon myself to be a student in such a variety of explorations, a variety of modes of exploring what we do in this art form. And for me, that was such a treat and inspiration, and fed in some ways very directly into how I then would go into rehearsal the next day. I mean, or how I was preparing myself for my next rehearsal. That the dialogue that I was brought into, physical explorations that these wonderful people shared with us, facilitated, it inspired me, and just reminded me, I was telling Nicole, reminded me that there's so many different approaches, and it's easy to sort of get holed up a little bit into your one way or my one way, out of habit, and to be reminded that there's so many wonderful, viable, expansive approaches. It's just so reassuring, and makes me feel like I'm sort of just at the beginning again, myself. And that's a really fun place to be.
Yeah. I think I was, I've been lamenting a little bit that I'm getting older and feel like it's a little bit harder to, I don't know, like maybe am I coming to the end? Do I know everything I'm going to know? I know I'm not, but it feels a little bit harder to get information, maybe just where I live geographically or, you know, but I realized, I think last night after the show, I thought, after seeing everyone work and everything feels so vital to each person and the passing along of information and the sharing, I was like, oh my, I have 10 or 20 more years to do this.
At least.
I mean,
You know, well, I mean, you know,
More than
how old
that.
am I? I'll be, yes, 30. Let's say 30. 40. Anyway, it was, I got a new sense of revitalization of, I'm not at the end of my ideas. That's what it is. I'm not just spinning my wheels. These things they're alive, they move, they can intersect with other people's ideas and hybridize. Not a word, but okay. Hybridize. So and I felt a little bit like I had a foot in one camp and a foot in the other camp just because I lived here for so long. And I have a lot of connections to the people who participated in the work and in the workshops. So I didn't feel like a facilitator necessarily, but I felt like a bit of a connector.
And this is the first you'd met all these?
And it was the first I had met all of these people too. So it was really amazing watching the dance, the moving humans of Columbus, Ohio, interact with movement in vastly different ways with new people in the mix. It was really incredible to see them suddenly look past me and the people who are normally here and sort of see new options, new territory.
Yeah, I would speak to that as well, in that all of us, Nicole somewhat, but all of us don't live here. So we came, not unusual for us for me to come to gatherings and meet new people and new students. But the idea of taking place is like taking the place, like Columbus. taking the Garden Theater. These
They'll
particular
occupy.
BB's house, BB's garden. I mean, to be given somebody's home, that's such an intimate space. Live there like it's ours, or to be in this theater as if it's our theater or the town, and everybody telling us about all the food in town, and people being really excited about where they live and that we're here. So taking place is like kind of like taking the place. And the body's here. That's a place. Like, it makes me think the body's as a place as well. So there's something very special about being here.
Yeah.
With what already exists, like what you're saying. Like.
Yeah.
There is something that there is like an interesting tension between how transient it is and how intense it feels as this rooting. And then, you know, I've been kind of sampling from the words that you have been saying. It's like there is this, CoCo says, like, is this moment of, and CoCo and Peter were saying, it's like, it's a kind of a new beginning, but at the same time, it's a moment of transition. It's a, you know, of course, in your words, we can see this ephemerality of life and ephemerality of dance, you know, in a way, is passing yet relevant, passing yet crucial to feel the caring about the moment and about the space, or the space that our body occupies. So it's an interesting thing. It's like how in the words, and you were talking about also how it felt, you know, about the experience. Is this perhaps very important conditions of living, you know? And then also I want to point out, perhaps because also I consider myself as a part of this circulation of workers for the arts that, you know, have to work in different places, and then how obliterated is the notion of home, but at the same time how we get a different understanding of the whole, of the reality of the system, of the reality of the tension between the global and the local, for example. It's something that I can also see in your words. You know, it's like, what is this? What is a place, actually? and I think that, you know, I just reminded me of the distinction between place and site. You know, there is, I don't remember the theorist, he says like place can be, is the geography where we live in the biosphere, and site is where we create more frequent actions. So when we move more often, when we engage in what the space affords. So also, you know, it creates this idea of site can be just this space where we cognitively focus. So anyway, so I think that it is this interesting thing of how our own engagement creates the sensation of sight, or the sensation of relevance, perhaps, or engagement. Okay.
I would say that, I would say, to be more specific, that it's maybe not even sight that you're referring to, it's presence. Because it's like sight, I think that implies like some sort of visual element, but I think that presence implies like engagement, like an interactive engagement, and that I think that places, it could be geographical, but I think places like kind of where we embody presence, actually. Rather than geographical, especially in this day and age, like places where we are present. And that could be. Sorry?
Or where we imagine presence to be.
Right, exactly. Where we're projecting that presence. And I think when you say, Marlon, that home, this idea of home is obliterated, I would say maybe, like, I would say distributed, or maybe fluid. Like home is fluid and distributed these days rather than obliterated completely. It's just, you know, I think the definition of home has become fluid.
Yeah, like I think that it's changing, you know, like one of the things that I feel, you know, mostly, you know, I think that it's almost like how difficult it is. Now I feel that it doesn't come through just dwelling. It's literally an active action of pursuing a sense of home.
In our world, there's, I mean, we have different notions of home depending on what our cultural background is. And in the West, we tend to have a notion of home as four walls and a roof, and it's one place, and might have this nostalgia. I have nostalgia for the farm that I grew up on, and it's very localized in my mind, and I can visualize it very specifically. But there are other ways of living in the world that express home. I mean, if you think of a nomadic culture, the sense of home is by definition fluid. And the anthropologist Michael Jackson writes about that beautifully, and talks about how a sense of place, a sense of memory exists in many different things in the larger environment, and one can find a source of connection or a source of energy or a source of presence from so many variable places if we allow ourselves to be available to them. That is to say that if we have a fixed notion of where we are comfortable, then it might be that we're reinforcing a notion that we can only be comfortable in one place. And instead, if we can be practicing a notion of finding ease or finding ways into a wider variety of situations, then we're actually practicing or developing our skill at being more fluid.
Well, I think isn't that what we do when we're making works that move? We're inviting people into these experiences alongside ourselves, where we reconstruct constantly the way we think, see, feel, configure, relate. It just reminded me I find myself saying, not to be sort of so definite, but most of the time, the only time I feel like I am in my own skin is when I am in relationship to someone making something with them. That's where I feel like I'm in my own skin, where I feel at home. So, you hear it all the time. Your home goes with you. It's inside of you, or whatever. But I think sometimes we are constantly doing that when we enter into these processes where we kind of tear down our notions of what makes us comfortable and where we know all of the tools and all of the sort of decor and everything. We tear it all down and we kind of rebuild it. We're constantly practicing that. Making this place, this experience, this thing that happens now, and then it goes back to the ephemeral nature of performance. Here it is, it's gone. Now we make another, now it's gone. Here, it feels the same way. We built these really beautiful homes and with these wonderful workers with us.
One of the things that also come into the words that we have used, the soma word, and also the other root that is interesting, or etymology, is the echo. The ecology, the root of ecology actually is used, translates also that sense of home. But interesting is like a home is done through relations. It has a definition that is relational, mostly if you use the understanding of economy, for example, ecology. So, and I think that that's part of this whole discussion. What is this practice that is in the making, and this making that is a practice in itself? Always then we find ourselves in this languaging, very kind of time-based, using, being aware of the process, being aware of the things that are passing, and also the kind of perhaps reality of change. So one thing that also I wanted to kind of put out there is kind of explore for you again, in this ongoing process. It's like, what do you think is different? Like, I think that I get these questions because in relationship with our education. So what do you think is different now, in this present, in relationship with what you expected from dance to be, that can go sometimes in this quite dystopic aspect of the reality of the dance market, or the we call the dance market is the field, and then also in education, etc. What is now, how it has changed? And someone actually sent me a question for you. How do you deal with to keep yourself motivated? How do you nurture to keep going in these difficult times? Many things there.
I would say that there's something about even continuing this talk about the transient nature of what we do, is that I also am not reinventing the wheel every time I go somewhere. There's something I continue to do. Mm-hmm. And I lay claim to something that continues to be my work, mm-hmm. engaging with a new place and the people mm-hmm. of it. And I wrote down 2 questions: do I adapt, or do I remain the same, or mm-hmm. how do I continue to grow? And you know, it feels very political if I look at what's happening in the Middle East, or like other kinds of wars that are about boundaries and claiming this is our home and not your home. And like, what is the edge or the space in between that of the discussion around those things, or the art around those things? And I don't really know the answer to solving them, or if there's a solution. But for me, the continuing of dance is different because of an economy of corporations, perhaps. Different for me than when I started dancing in New York in the 80s, where you could afford more, and you could also, there wasn't a lot of many mediators to go through in order to even be talking to somebody to produce your work. But it's also now creating new little galleries and weird old places in those other surrounding areas, so the space opens, and something's created because of the economy. I don't know what all that is, but it's something that I feel it's not. I am not changing all the time. Something in me is continuing to remain larger in the face of change, and wiser, or something about that.
Who else?
Well, I picked up on your word motivate. How do we motivate ourselves? And for myself, I like to learn something. So I want to learn something in an investigation, and then embody something, create something through the body, which is how I learn, and have that fulfill itself, which usually triggers something else that I'm interested in. So, so it's a continuing process, and I make sure I have around me people who inspire me. I study autonomy with someone in New York City, and I have a group in New Jersey where we show work every week. I have another group that shows work every month. So there's that being around people who are making things and studying. So I think I had to kind of think, what do I need? And answer that.
Yeah, because that was a question that came up like probably 3 times in the post. You know, it's like, because perhaps it's a question, it's like, how can this be a career? You know, how can this be something that I can decide to keep going? Mostly the younger people have you know, young, I can see through their posts, and I know some of them have this curiosity. It's like, how do we keep ourselves nurtured, healthy, curious, and how do we deal with perhaps things that have changed in what I thought, you know, or what I experienced, you know. And one of the things that also I've been in conversation, and I hear a talk of, there is a theorist called Bojana Kunst in Germany. She works from Gießen University. She also talks about how the creative worker, how is it called, no? And how the new creative industries are trying to push this ongoing education for life, just literally to make you change all the time, in that really hyper flexible kind of worker. And normally the artist is the most quintessential example of that we even evaluate as really good. The creative artist reinventing himself or herself every 5 years is actually a malady of the economic system. So even what we think about this creative aspect and how it's literally coming through this forcing ourselves to ongoing recreate ourselves. So it's kind of the performance of the worker.
Well, if you think of yourself as not a thing, but as a process itself, then it kind of solves that.
And I don't think it's specific to dance or art. I think it's just human. These kids growing up wondering how they stay motivated and happy. Well, we're all learning that, right? I mean, I think it's just what it is. I think, but like Claire said, like she learns through her body. We process that human action through movement, through making.
Yeah. But also what I'm trying to point at is that, for example, on here, I'm kind of expanding the boundary of the inquiry a little bit. The performance includes what you, Nicole, has been doing to create this context. So I think that there is something quite interesting that sometimes when we tend to see, okay, the process is this, okay, but definitely I am trying to point out that perhaps something that is extremely relevant, and in a lot of my experience that I have in Germany, in Berlin, is a lot of the artists are extremely aware that their main skill is creating their own context and understanding critically their own contexts. Practically, they're not even learning a craft. They're learning critical thinking. So, and then they become makers or creators, but even the creation of the whole thing. And this is not to say that, this is to say that, that's a very important part of the realization of the process. Okay, so it's something like that. So to see what sparks in the conversation. I always like to leave a little bit of political out there, just in the discussion, because sometimes it gets kind of circular as the process is this a little bubble or isolation in which the artist creates, and then creation is actually this inter and externalization of a context that was literally choreographed, or planned. So how do you respond to this? What do you think?
Well, I think when when each of us is making something or we are very much involved with, for me anyway, I'm very much involved in a process of having a notion about something. In some ways it seems so vivid, and then in the process of trying to realize it, whether that's bringing other bodies to use in space somehow to make this notion visible, to make it manifest, that's where there are moments where it seems so difficult and complicated, because of the translation of what I'm experiencing in an idea as a beginning. Once you set that out, you can't control it anymore. and it's not so much that I want to control it or that I need to control it, but you set something in motion, and then it's physics. It stays in motion. But we then, it's one thing to go from me to then a group of other artists with whom I'm building something, and then it's yet another thing when you invite an audience in to bear witness to the thing that you have made, wherever it happens to be in the process. And I feel like that part of the equation is maybe where we make a transition into, to use your word, marketplace, when we are taking the thing that we make essentially for ourselves or out of some self-interest and expand it out into a group of unsuspecting and yet willing participants all of the wonderful people that came to the show last night, you know, we then we then are in relationship to them, and the things that we've made are now literally in dialogue with them, and who knows how those things will ripple out. That's really where it becomes rhizomatic. I mean, it is by nature, right?
Yeah, like that's perhaps, you know, like the rhizome again, like the metaphor that Josephine used, is of course understanding that there is a system, you know, and you know, the market, how I see it with that kind of heavy word, is literally say, what is the system of distribution of the knowledge that we embodied? So in a way, it's trying to point out that how we navigate in this context from the universities to the funding bodies to the theaters to the local communities, and then there is the circulation on the internet of where I work. So all this it has, of course, this condition of circulation. So then one question perhaps to point out to this transmission of knowledge. How do you what do you think is relevant to actually educate now our artists? You know, what I say actually is beyond the you know, there is a craft in what you do. So anyway, perhaps the big question is like, what do you think is extremely relevant right now to facilitate?
I guess it's, for me, I would just think whatever I'm interested in learning is relevant. And so I think that it's a purely subjective thing. Maybe someone with a more distinct practice in a specific modality might say something different, but I feel like whatever I'm interested in learning is, you know, whatever anyone is interested in learning is relevant. And if people are, I think it's more about who's in the room. So.
Yeah, and to maybe elaborate on that, I wonder, like, how, I'm trying to remember, like, when I've been in a situation that is defined as a learning situation.
Exactly.
I might have an inkling of what it is I'm getting myself into, but very often I don't know what I'm interested in learning in that moment. I just have put myself in a situation of being exposed to something new, presumably. And learning comes in the discovery, not so much in the deciding what it is I'm interested in learning. I mean, there are times where I might be interested in learning a very specific skill that I think someone else has, but there are also times where we discover interest through the process of exposure.
Yeah.
You know, we have this simultaneous experience of cognition and corporeal sensation, and where we happen to direct our awareness or our focus, or that makes it even sound like I'm the agent of directing it. So often my interest is guided by what is coming at me, what I am, what washes over me from the outside world, whether it's the breeze that passes me, or whether it's touching someone's skin, or whether it's an idea. So I think awareness is maybe like developing skills for being aware in a wide variety of ways. That to me seems extremely relevant for anybody, regardless of what stage in life you happen to be and what your professed interest might be.
I think if I bring it back to being a performing artist and working as a teacher and a facilitator of that realm, is that there's something that continues to keep performance as this precious thing, that something particular has to happen. The audience doesn't know what's going to happen. Audiences come because they want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So the word unsuspecting is, I mean, I understand that, but I think there's something to demystify it more and more for people who come to want to become performing artists, is that you have to put yourself into a performance situation to learn about performance.
Right.
And there's so much pressure, and there's so much trauma, and there's so much shock about, like, what just happened? And it's like, how can I continue to, as a performer and as a maker and as a teacher, create that situation as still part of the process, but it's not the same thing as the process. And it's not like I'm just, like, the idea of a marketplace is really good. I'm a farmer. I can grow the crops. I can eat them with my family. But there's something about going out to that market and selling it so other people can eat it. And there's a chain of something that we're doing with each other. And I just feel like it's like performance is a wound or something that people feel, not everybody, that they have to get through, rather than it's really it's what we do. Like somebody working in office, creating something, building a computer. It's not going to stay in the factory.
Yeah.
You
fly a plane, flying a plane, or having
this medium of exchange. And I'm not doing something to an audience. I'm hopefully awakening something in my people, in me and in them, that is, it doesn't happen anywhere else in terms of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that a lot of the associations perhaps that we have with the doing is fear of rejection. So that is actually passion or desperation for success. So I think that, you know, and that's tied to the idea of the market, right? So if someone is going to like more this produce than the other produce. So I think that there is something quite interesting here, how the performance or the characteristics of the encounter of making, that is what you've been doing, is actually just a very amazingly fruitful social event. Is how I see it. So then, but the thing is, you know, we have this interesting construction about success and experiences of success and failure and career and tied to something that is actually a very performatively fruitful event in itself, encounter in itself. So there are places in Europe that they are actually doing now this kind of residencies as the performance itself, you know. And then of course there are encounters, there are openings to people, but it's interesting because I hear you, KJ, it's not about eliminating the performance as the opening to the process. It's more about how can we place it in a way that is part of the whole thing, not derived to perhaps to this degree of perhaps certain degrees of anxiety or separating it too much.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what.
And part of that, I think, is keeping it fluid.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about before about this fixed notion of home versus something that is a little more, has more flexibility to it. If we think of the performance as this sort of singular defining moment that is make or break, then it takes on this significance that, I mean, it might be that certain things are heightened in a performance situation, but I think as we've been talking some over the last week and a half, to really be remembering that it's part of this larger trajectory that we're all on, and that we are continuing through it, and we're not just building up to this one thing and considering it a rigid statement of who we are, or ta-da, that's it, end of story, and either it's loved and it succeeds, or it's despised and it fails. I mean, it's not so black or white.
On that note, I think to be a working artist over the years, you have to develop the thick skin of success and failure, and that is just more information to continue any direction you're going. But it's people are not going to like it, and people are going to like it maybe. The idea of the continuing work, related to what Peter just said, is what's key.
Yeah.
And
I think that, and I'm just going to, I think that what you say is very important, and then throw back the idea of the curator, because when I talk about the, I think that is interesting. Who is the one who doesn't like it, or who is the one who likes it? And then how do you keep your integrity of your intuition or your intelligence, in relationship with what Nicole was saying? It's like, I want to do what I want to do, but it's like, how do we put all this together, and in what I call the entrapment of box office. So then how our creative processes kind of adapt and modulate, or are really protected by a really intelligent curator. Because an intelligent curator can say, hey, this artist wants to do a show just for 3 people every half an hour, and that cannot be measured with the same indicator of Broadway, So that's one thing that perhaps we have to point out, that within this political economy of our system, there is, what is this then? Success, more people?
I think the challenge is if you make something, then it's, well, who's interested in that? Who'd be interested in what I made? So how do you reach those people who might be interested in what you're creating? I think that's, you put on I used to put on a different hat. Who wants this hat? And then the creating hat.
Yeah, there is, I think there
It might be different.
It might
Right.
be different.
Different. I think it's a different
who
mind.
wants it might be a different population
From
at different times, depending on
yeah.
the thing that you're making.
Yeah.
You brought it
No, I just
first,
want to
go.
say that I think we're also talking about the bad marketers, or there is support out there. There is a great thing to wanting to have success, to be seen. It's not just a communal endeavor. But I think that, to kind of open it, that there are people who want to show what you're doing in ways that will move you, even in ways you don't know yet, so that the market is supportive. That's all I want to say.
I also think people are starving for art. You may not know it, but I think they are starving. And if you generate something authentic and fresh and true to you, and you feed that starving audience.
One of the words that also came, and I watched a friend who's working with mobs, with a kind of ballet, El Mercat de las Flors in Barcelona, that they're doing this interesting gatherings between producers, presenters, and artists. Practically what you did, Nicole, right now, but with 3 presenters from the beginning.
3% from the beginning.
3 presenters. Yeah, like for example, that it is kind of to create a context for making the accompanamiento, kind of company together, getting together and growing together. That in theory is what a lot of curators do. That's the new paradigm that you develop together. But they then created this context, and then they have them for like 3-4 days as part of the ongoing discussion and creative process, hanging out together. So it's an interesting thing. It's like, because it's our idea of the market is that this other is the one who's buying the product. But of course, when Claire says, like, I put the hat, that efficiency perhaps, or effectiveness of knowing what the other needs, also comes through social relationships. It's just knowing It's just knowing about the other and having the sensibility. So I think that is an interesting thing. It's like how we can perhaps frame this as a quite social process, and then this not us here producing and creating to see if the other wants. It's like, hey, how we can create together what we think we want together.
There's an example that occurred this weekend with Peter, who why don't you address the Arboretum in their invitation?
So for the piece that I made, I wanted Nicole to carry a large branch from a tree, and I didn't want to walk up to someone's tree with the saw and cut it off. So I went to the Arboretum at the Ohio State University and found someone to talk to and told them that why I was here and about the project, and that maybe they had a branch that they would be willing to give to me. And sure enough, they cut some bamboo for me. And the woman, Mary Maloney is her name, at the Chadwick Arboretum at OSU, she and her assistants were so excited to help that when I went to pick up these two bamboo branches, she said, "Oh, you come back on Monday and do the dance over here in front of our building, and then on July 20th we're having an open house at the Arboretum. Come and do it then." She even said, as we were leaving, she said, "It's summertime. Don't go into a theater. Come outside."
That's awesome.
She was really genuinely excited and enthusiastic about this. I don't know, that maybe some potential that she saw, some possibility that was stimulated in her imagination by me sort of looking for a branch. I mean, it seems so innocuous in a way, but I guess we can't really know. Like,
did they come last
No,
night?
they weren't able to come. Sadly, but
very symbolic, I would say, talking about rhizomes and branching and connections.
Yeah, I think that's a great example.
Yeah, and one of the things that, of course, because we need to start wrapping up, is how to continue. One of the things that perhaps this idea of the temporal togetherness and an aperture of processes, of course, there are economic factors, there are boundaries of that, but I think that there is something that is quite generous in a lot of the processes. In my experience, when you may have an idea, there is a possibility of asking, and then what happens is this miracle of generosity. Like the stuff start happening, and then around that some kind of economy or financial support is generated or not. But sometimes stuff actually happens. So anyway, is that question for you to kind of how do you think this can keep going? Or in my end, through the end of Meta Academy, we will try to maintain a continuity of the dialogue. Doesn't mean that it's totally linear. It doesn't mean at all, actually, that it's linear. But in a way, it's a sequence with a series of conversations and interventions. So what is there for you? What do you think? How can you bring closure to the discussion, but with an idea of continuity?
I think logistically, I've been thinking about taking place anywhere, taking place London, taking place wherever. I love the idea of getting people together. And
hey, I have an idea.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's about the garden. Maybe taking place in a town. Asks of the artist that they make some connection outside themselves, such as the Arboretum.
Yeah.
Each one, so that Columbus, for example, has these what were you calling those
Rhizomes.
nerve centers, those rhizomes,
Those rhizomes.
and then you did it. You could just gather some people and go to a town and call Taking Place Teaneck,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
and you have to make connections in each part of the town. That the challenge would be to make
Mhm.
Yeah.
specific
Well, I think-
town idea.
I was going to say earlier that one of the relevant things I was thinking about passing on, about sort of transmitting information, is the ability to create one's own opportunities in the marketplace and in the making. In the continuation of what we're doing is done through that. And I was tying it in. I was thinking that, if you want to keep creating your own opportunities, if you want to have a vital career, you have to be generous. You have to give of yourself in order to teach, that in order to show, in order to exhibit, that then does create more opportunities. It opens up more giving and more opportunities for receiving. So somehow giving that over, or offering that as a way of making and being into the people that you have contact with in the field.
Yeah.
So that talking about taking place and making those connections to whatever locale you land in is putting that into practice. It's actually the artists who arrive in that place as the collaborating artists having to make opportunities for themselves to connect to the place that they land in, thus and each other, thus exhibiting that generosity that then turns over the giving and the receiving.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, because it occurs to me this tension also between feeling safe and generosity. So, like, how can a context can be created, that perhaps is a question, that generates enough safety that also enhances the potential for generosity, and I think generosity is extremely related with creativity, and also the sense of safety is the freedom from actually creating something that can be so different and weird that no one would like it, and who cares. So I think that there is something about how can we create those contexts with X or Y format that actually feel safe, that sense of safety and not scarcity, okay, so can generate more generosity. And then there is a way that then artists, perhaps we will keep sharing or share more than what we do, and share not only in Facebook, it's actually sharing like the home or the resources that we have. And I think this is, again, for me, very tightly related with certain kind of new economies that perhaps we have to revise or try to see what the implications of, for example, having a taking place that is either a branded event that can be franchised, that's one model, or an event that is an open source format that everybody can copy in the world. So those are ethical positions. So, and how we sit in that is a very important reflection, I think. How much do we think about generosity, but think a very limited way about authorship, for example? And that is something that I feel that is part of what we are trying to do in Meta Academy, also bring certain awareness of, like, what are the formats that we are using, what are the sites,
we were talking about we were talking about this, and I was going to say, respectfully, the open format, open share format, within this group, I have not felt one time that there was a sense of, oh, this is kind of my territory. You can see it and you can learn from it. It's been a sense of respectfully stealing, like, I don't take this, try it on, work with it, play inside of it, take it home with you, right, or home, and whirl it around, work with it, and that feels the most productive and the most expansive. And that also creates a sense of, I think, to people who you are engaging with, that you can be your own expert in the way that you do this. You can play inside of your own sense of expertise and then share it out. You don't have to wait for a particular set of circumstances to come around to get a set of knowledge. Like, I have to go visit the guru to get the information. I have to go here to get the information. It's like you can kind of show up and borrow and take on and take off and discard, and that sense of connectivity feels really good. You can't help it, but I think I engage with people who think that, oh, they can't do this. They have to come and see me, or they have to go and travel here to get this information. And I try to say, you know, look around and take from this and try this on and discard this and become your own sense of your own source, until you find someone who sit next to you and say, hey, I'm a source too. Let's talk about what we're doing. So that kind of sense of openness is what I like about sharing and illuminating, and having illuminated for me.
Good. Any other thoughts?
Well, I was thinking that word of safety that you brought up. It just occurred to me that how much is a sense of our safety based on a perception of something that hasn't yet happened, right? And so we might imagine that someone might not like this thing that we're making, or we might, who knows what we might imagine, and that sets into motion a whole series of decisions that we make, or feelings that we have about the rightness of where we are or what we're doing, and it seems, I mean, is it possible that a very simple, I'm thinking of the exercise that you started your workshop with this week, where you had us just look to actually see the other person in very close detail. We stood opposite each other in close proximity, and CoCo asked us to really, almost in a cinematic way, survey the landscape of our partner's face. And form, and then zoom out and sort of see them in the context of the room that we were in, or what was farther in the background, or what was right in the foreground. And that, to engage in that process with a complete stranger, on the one hand, could feel quite unnerving, right? And that very process of actually just seeing, of actually being where you are in that moment, and not projecting something, not giving in to some idea of some eventuality that hasn't happened. Instead, you come back to this very present moment, and you see this person or this situation for what it is, and then suddenly you feel safe. Suddenly you feel, oh, this is someone that on some level I know, or I have a kinship with, that allows me then to enter into a fabulous, creative, physical exploration that then unfolded over 2 hours. But I guess the point, or question again, coming back to, what is it about, what is it that makes us feel unsafe, or worried, or apprehensive about, and then ... you fill in the blanks. And then is there something that we can do that actually is centering, or is a sort of rewiring that is just based in the simple act of being where you are, not falling prey to something that you think could happen, but instead trusting that where you are might lead you somewhere, that to a place that you actually are capable of handling.
Yeah, well, that I think is, you know, like I love the approach, because definitely there are certain kinds of, encounters and intersubjectivities that, or even a stance that can allow us to keep going. But perhaps, what I'm trying also is like to put what are those two variables that may meet in the middle. What are the the set of conditions that can facilitate that encounter for this to be the less paranoid possible. Because that's one of the things that is a question, as you said, is like what are the conditions that generate safety to perhaps enhance the possibilities of a created endeavor, and then
Well, I just want to speak to that because for many reasons, but one of the things about I think about this the idea of language again and how we reorganize our way of thinking about something. Like one of the things I learned from body-mind centering is that to really question sensation that you think is pain might really just be unfamiliar sensation. Like when you're like, "Ow, that really hurts," and then it's like, "Wait a minute, does it really hurt, or am I just uncomfortable?" And we had something come up in my rehearsals where some emotions were coming up, and I just said, this is not a haven. The work is not a haven, but there's a safety within that we're here together doing this that makes it safe to take risks like that. But it's not to be safe and not take the risks and not be invulnerable or
not to just do what you know, but actually
and to go into the unfamiliarity. And it makes me think too of this idea what Claire said about that we're starving for art, but I think we have so much to give that we want to give and be received. So at the same time that we're thirsty and we're hungry, we also have so much to give, and somehow there's something there in the safety of that exchange that we're not victims.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful, that kind of stance of generosity, because definitely I would say that what I have learned is like the stance of generosity immediately put you in a non-victim position, even if you feel that being framed and have a lot of things stolen, when you say, okay, that's given to the world. So I think that, of course, and what I try to perhaps in this discussion that is a quite complex issue is how much are those infrastructures that we need to also design and try to create them as conditions that definitely perhaps would be part of governance, will be part of making a lot of fair changes that we may think, not only modifying our cognitive framework about experience. Because, for example, there is a lot of things that happen in this event that goes beyond a reframing of the experience. There were a lot of conditions that have to be created, that, space, time. So it's those conditions that I'm also want perhaps to us to consider how to meet in the middle. That is not just that internal experience, which is very powerful, but, and I agree with you, Peter, in a lot of the ideas, and very familiar, at least resonate a lot with me, because I practice Vipassana and all that stuff. So it's a lot of interesting things there. But then it's like, how much can we advocate? That points out perhaps to something that KJ was talking in 2 sessions ago. It's like the political also aspect of in what we do.
I was thinking, you mentioned back to safety. I thought you were referring, in addition to what we've been talking about, the safety of protecting our work. I thought you referred to that a little bit. So, for example, if Nicole wants to do this again, will you incorporate or copyright or whatever that is, protect it in some way? will, if someone takes the idea and does it somewhere else, is that person, there's that, wait a minute, it's Nicole's thing, and someone else taking it, that's the political safety mix-up.
Yeah.
So I thought you were referring to that, and that
No,
probably...
like I think I pointed that in the decision-making process, that we are having this open process right now, and then it will be part of the managerial ethical decisions what kind of a stance she has in relationship to, okay, let's say taking place can be a copyrighted, branded, directly, no one can do this if it doesn't pay me, or I do it, all right? Or the other extreme is an open Creative Commons format, like there are many, for example, meetups or Pecha Kucha, you know, a lot of different kinds of formats of encounter. So, but that's a position, you know, of the author to assume a stance.
Or the third thing.
The third thing.
It's the third thing.
Okay. Yeah, so...
Or the third thing.
Yeah, the third.
Just to get it out there, another model for that kind of thing is chapters. You know, the home base is here with the person who put it, the model, and then the model has chapters wherever anybody else wants to do it. It just follows the guidelines of, it has this kind of component, it has this kind of component, it brings this thing together.
There's something about there's something about who's facilitating it. There's something about who's curating, you know, who's making connections in the community on behalf of the project. Like that's
those are
a
big
lot.
things.
You know, it's the thing.
Yeah.
So.
No, like I think that's a question. There are, for example, the on-conference model. That is a really interesting thing, but that's a huge discussion. But I think that it's very relevant for even our strategies of knowledge distribution, because one of the things that we are definitely witnessing is a shift in traditional notions of authorship, ownership, and also in a very, very precarious economy. So I think that then it requires a lot of thinking and reformulation, I think, in relationship with our ways of doing. That it doesn't mean denying the right of authorship, but perhaps it is something that it has to be redesigned or just investigated. So, well, I wanted to thank you, and also if you have a last word in this session, I'm very perhaps curious. You know, I'll have fun a lot here in the site, so, so I'm always curious. You know, so you know, like how it was for you, and then I hope that we can keep meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Rachel and
Bye.
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 yeah, I want to invite you to keep going. You know, but if you are in our list or in the Meta Academy group, you will be receiving invitations for the conversations. Can be great that we can have you also as guests in the other conversations from home, from the comfort of your own home, whatever that is.
Yes.
Can't wait. It's
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Ciao, ciao. And I will stop the broadcast.